CEO, fired veteran single dad on Christmas. But when his Medal of Honor was revealed to the world, the powerful woman who ruined him dropped to her knees, begging for forgiveness. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The gentle hum of fluorescent lights filled the corporate office as Daniel Cole's fingers moved steadily across his keyboard. Outside the frost-touched window, snowflakes drifted lazily past the 20th floor, dusting the city below in a peaceful white blanket. The clock on his computer showed 4:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve, and he was determined to finish this last report before heading home. Daniel paused his typing to rub his tired eyes, his gaze drifting to the worn silver frame on his desk. Laura's bright smile beamed back at him from the photograph, her arms wrapped around a toddler Lily at the beach. The familiar ache in his chest squeezed gently, but he smiled at the memory. 3 years had passed since the cancer took Laura, but her spirit still guided him every day. "Just a little longer, honey," he whispered to the photo. "Then I can give our girl the Christmas she deserves." He had been pulling extra hours for weeks, coming in early and staying late to ensure he could take tomorrow off. His supervisor had unofficially approved it, acknowledging Daniel's outstanding work ethic over his 15 years with the company. The thought of Lily's face when she opened her presents tomorrow morning kept him going through the long hours. The office around him had slowly emptied as other employees left early for their holiday celebrations. Only a handful remained, their typing and quiet conversations creating a peaceful backdrop to his work. The Christmas tree in the break room twinkled with white lights, and someone had left a plate of cookies on the counter, probably Janet from accounting, who always went overboard with holiday baking. Daniel's phone buzzed, interrupting his concentration. A text from Mrs. Henderson, his elderly neighbor who watched Lily after school. "Your little angel just finished decorating sugar cookies. She insisted on saving the best ones for Santa." He smiled, typing back a quick thank you. The cookie decorating would keep Lily busy until he could pick her up. Just this last report to finish. "Mr. Cole?" Daniel looked up to find Marcus, the CEO's assistant, standing stiffly beside his cubicle. The young man's usually cheerful face was oddly tight. "Miss Hale would like to see you in her office immediately." Something in Marcus's tone made Daniel's stomach clench. He saved his work and stood, straightening his tie. "Of course. Thank you, Marcus." The walk to the executive suite felt longer than usual. Their footsteps echoed in the nearly empty office as Marcus led him past the premium view windows and designer furniture. They stopped at a sleek glass door with Vivien Hale, Chief Executive Officer, etched in modern script. Marcus knocked once and opened the door. "Mr. Cole is here, Miss Hale." "Send him in." Vivien Hale sat behind an imposing black desk, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping on a tablet screen. She didn't look up as Daniel entered, making him stand there for several uncomfortable moments before she finally acknowledged his presence. "Sit down, Mr. Cole." Daniel lowered himself into one of the minimalist chairs facing her desk. At 35, Vivien was one of the youngest CEOs in the industry. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her expensive charcoal suit probably cost more than Daniel made in a month. She finally set down her tablet and fixed him with a cool stare. "Mr. Cole, I'll be direct. We're making some necessary changes as we head into the new year. The board has approved a comprehensive restructuring of our operations." Daniel's heart began to pound, but he kept his expression neutral. Years of military training had taught him to maintain composure under pressure. "Your position," Vivien continued, "has been identified as redundant. Your methods are outdated. The company is moving in a more progressive direction, and, quite frankly, your resistance to adopting our new digital platforms has become problematic." "Ma'am," Daniel said carefully, "I've completed all the required training for the new systems. My productivity metrics are well above average." "This isn't a negotiation, Mr. Cole." Vivien's voice cut through his protest like ice. "The decision has been made. Security will escort you to clear out your desk. Your final paycheck and severance package details will be emailed to you." Daniel sat very still, his military discipline the only thing keeping him from showing the shock and anger that surged through him. "Today? On Christmas Eve?" "The timing is unfortunate," Vivien replied, though her tone suggested she found it merely inconvenient rather than cruel. "But business decisions can't always wait for convenient moments." "I have a daughter," Daniel said quietly. "She's 7. I'm all she has." Something flickered in Vivien's eyes, so brief he might have imagined it, before her professional mask slammed back into place. The severance package is generous. HR has prepared a list of job search resources. She pressed a button on her desk phone. Marcus, please have security meet Mr. Cole at his desk. Daniel stood slowly, his spine straight and shoulders squared, the same posture that had carried him through battlefields and loss. Thank you for the opportunity to serve this company, Miss Hale. He turned and walked out before she could respond, his dignity intact even as his world crumbled around him. The security guard was already waiting by his cubicle with an empty box when he returned. With mechanical movements, Daniel began placing his belongings in the box. The family photo went in first, wrapped carefully in his spare sweater. Then his coffee mug from Lily's first Father's Day, his small desk plant, the drawings Lily had made that decorated his cubicle walls. Around him, the few remaining employees watched in shocked silence. Janet from accounting had tears in her eyes. Tom from sales looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Daniel picked up the box, its weight nothing compared to the heavy burden in his chest. He thought of Lily waiting at Mrs. Henderson's, excited about Christmas morning, and his throat tightened painfully. Without looking back, he walked toward the elevator, the security guard a silent shadow behind him. The Christmas tree in the break room still twinkled cheerfully, mocking the darkness that had descended on his holiday. As the elevator doors closed on the office that had been his professional home for 15 years, Daniel held his head high, refusing to let them see him break. But inside, his mind raced with questions he couldn't answer. How would he pay the mortgage? What about Lily's school tuition? How could he make Christmas special now? The box in his arms felt heavier with each step toward the parking garage, filled not just with office mementos, but with 15 years of dedication and loyalty, now dismissed as outdated by someone who had never known the weight of real sacrifice. Daniel's footsteps echoed through the marble lobby, the cardboard box heavy in his arms. A few stray paper clips rattled against the framed photo of Lily and Sarah that he'd kept on his desk for the past 7 years. The security guard at the front desk looked away, pretending to be busy with his monitors. The afternoon light filtering through the glass doors cast long shadows across the polished floor. Behind him, whispers and hushed conversations drifted down from the upper floors where his former colleagues gathered at the railings, watching his departure. Suddenly, the lobby doors burst open, letting in a swirl of snowflakes and a gust of cold air. "Daddy! Daddy!" Lily's voice rang out, clear and bright as sleigh bells. Daniel's heart caught in his throat. His 7-year-old daughter bounded toward him, her purple winter coat dusted with snow, her matching mittens clutching something that sparkled in the light. Behind her, Mrs. Thompson from next door gave him an apologetic wave through the glass doors. "Look what I made for your office." Lily skidded to a stop in front of him, her cheeks flushed from the cold, her eyes bright with excitement. Daniel carefully set down his box. "What's this, sweetheart?" Lily held up a large piece of red construction paper, folded in half. Glitter cascaded from its surface, catching the light and throwing tiny rainbows across the lobby floor. The front of the card featured a crayon drawing of what appeared to be their house, complete with a Christmas tree in the window and smoke curling from the chimney. More employees had gathered in the lobby now, forming a loose circle around them. Daniel could feel their eyes on him as Lily proudly opened the card. "I made it for everyone," she announced. "See? I wrote it myself." Inside, in careful child's handwriting done in green crayon, were the words, "Thank you to all the heroes at Daddy's company for helping him when he was a soldier. Merry Christmas. Love, Lily Cole." She had decorated the margins with small drawings of stars and hearts, and what looked like soldiers standing hand in hand with people in business suits. Glitter covered everything, sparkling like fresh snow. A soft murmur rippled through the gathered crowd. Daniel heard someone sniff, and when he looked up, he saw Janet from accounting dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Would you like me to read it to everyone?" Lily asked, looking around at all the faces. "I think they'd love that, sweetheart," Daniel managed to say past the lump in his throat. Lily cleared her throat and held up the card like she was giving a presentation in class. Her voice rang clear and strong through the lobby as she read her message, carefully pronouncing each word. When she finished, there was a moment of complete silence. Then, from somewhere in the back, someone started clapping. The applause spread quickly, filling the lobby with its thunder. Several people were wiping their eyes now. Mark from IT stepped forward and knelt down to Lily's level. "Thank you, Lily. That's the most beautiful Christmas card I've ever seen." Others moved closer. some patting Daniel on the shoulder, others complimenting Lily's artwork. Susan from Human Resources hugged him, whispering, "We're going to miss you, Daniel. You're a true hero." Lily beamed at all the attention, though she looked a bit confused. "Daddy, why are you carrying a box? Are you bringing work home for Christmas?" Daniel swallowed hard, looking at his daughter's innocent face. "Something like that, sweetheart. But right now, what do you say we head home and start our Christmas celebration early?" "Yes, please." Lily bounced on her toes. "Can we make hot chocolate with extra marshmallows?" "Extra marshmallows at Island." Daniel picked up his box with one arm and held out his other hand to Lily. She slipped her mittened fingers into his, still clutching her glittery masterpiece. As they walked toward the doors, the crowd parted respectfully. Daniel held his head high, his daughter's warm hand in his, giving him strength. The security guard stood and opened the door for them, offering a crisp salute that brought Daniel right back to his military days. Outside, the snow was falling harder now, transforming the city into a winter wonderland. Lily lifted her face to the sky, trying to catch snowflakes on her tongue. Daniel set down his box one more time and scooped her up in his arms, making her giggle. "Hold on tight to that card," he said, picking up the box again. Lily wrapped one arm around his neck while carefully protecting her creation with the other. Together, they made their way down the snowy sidewalk. Christmas lights twinkled in shop windows, and somewhere in the distance, church bells were ringing. The card in Lily's hand continued to shower glitter, leaving a sparkling trail behind them in the snow. Snow fell softly outside the old brick church as families filed in through the heavy wooden doors, their footsteps crunching on the salted path. Inside, hundreds of candles flickered in the warm sanctuary, casting a gentle glow over the wooden pews and stained glass windows. Daniel helped Lily brush snow from her red wool coat, her cheeks still rosy from their walk. She clutched her favorite stuffed bear, the one her mother had given her before passing away, as they found seats near the middle of the church. "Look at all the pretty lights, Daddy," Lily whispered, pointing at the garlands of evergreen and white twinkle lights that draped across the altar. "They're beautiful, sweetheart," Daniel replied softly, trying to keep his voice steady. This had been Sarah's favorite service of the year. He could almost hear her singing carols beside them, her clear voice rising with the choir. Mayor Thompson stood at the pulpit in his Sunday best, his round face beaming as he welcomed everyone. "What a blessed night to gather as a community," he began, his deep voice carrying through the church. "Christmas Eve is a time for family, for remembering what matters most." Lily snuggled closer to Daniel's side as the choir sang "Silent Night." Her small hand found his, and he squeezed it gently. The familiar melody wrapped around them like a warm blanket, bringing comfort despite the day's earlier pain. After several carols and readings, Mayor Thompson returned to the pulpit. His expression had grown more serious. "Tonight, we have a special presentation to make. Would Daniel Cole please join me up here?" Daniel froze, confused. Lily gave him a gentle push. "Go on, Daddy," she whispered excitedly. With uncertain steps, Daniel made his way to the front. The mayor's hand was warm and firm as he shook it, guiding Daniel to stand beside him. "Many of you know Daniel as a neighbor, a friend, a dedicated father," Mayor Thompson began. "But what some of you may not know is that before moving to our town, Daniel served our country with extraordinary courage and valor." The mayor reached into his jacket and pulled out a small blue velvet box. "It is my profound honor, on behalf of the President of the United States and a grateful nation, to present Daniel Cole with the Congressional Medal of Honor." A collective gasp rippled through the congregation. Daniel's throat tightened as the mayor opened the box, revealing the medal's distinctive star hanging from its light blue ribbon. 7 years ago, while serving as a combat medic, Daniel's unit came under heavy fire, the mayor continued. Despite being wounded himself, he ran through enemy fire not once, but 5 times to rescue his fallen comrades. His actions that day saved 11 lives. Daniel's hands trembled slightly as the mayor draped the medal around his neck. He thought of those moments in the desert, the searing heat, the chaos, the overwhelming need to reach his wounded brothers in arms. He hadn't done it for recognition or medals. He'd done it because they needed him. The paperwork for this award took years to process, Mayor Thompson explained to the gathered congregation. But today, on Christmas Eve, we can finally honor one of our town's true heroes. The first person to stand was old Mr. Jenkins, the World War II veteran who ran the hardware store. Then Mrs. Peterson, whose son was currently serving overseas. Soon the entire church was on its feet, applauding with tears in their eyes. Lily bounced up and down in her pew, clapping harder than anyone. "That's my daddy!" she called out proudly, her voice carrying through the church. Daniel searched for words, but emotion closed his throat. How could he explain that he didn't feel like a hero? That every life he saved that day was worth any risk? That he still remembered their faces, their names, their families waiting at home? He began, his voice rough. I just did what anyone would have done, what needed to be done. He touched the medal at his chest. This belongs to every service member who's ever put on the uniform, to those who didn't come home, to their families who wait and pray. The applause grew louder, punctuated by calls of "God bless you" and "Thank you for your service." Daniel felt the weight of the medal, so light in itself but heavy with meaning, with sacrifice, with duty. In the back row of the church, nearly hidden in shadow, Vivien Hale sat rigid in her designer coat. Her PR team had insisted she attend the service to help soften her image after recent negative press. But now, as she watched Daniel Cole, the man she'd dismissed just hours ago as obsolete, stand decorated as a war hero, the color drained from her face, she saw how the townspeople looked at him with admiration and respect, how his daughter beamed with pride, how Mayor Thompson's hand rested on his shoulder with genuine affection. This was no ordinary employee she had cast aside. This was someone who had risked everything to save others. The medal gleamed in the candlelight as Daniel made his way back to his seat, accepting handshakes and embraces from those he passed. Lily threw her arms around his neck as he sat down, careful not to knock the medal. Vivien slipped out of her pew and toward the side door, her heels clicking softly on the stone floor. The cold air hit her face as she stepped outside, but she barely noticed it. All she could see was Daniel Cole's face as she had fired him, his quiet dignity even in that moment of humiliation. And now she understood why. Inside the church, Daniel held Lily close as the congregation began singing "O Holy Night." The medal rested against his chest, a reminder not of glory but of service, of the true meaning of sacrifice. And despite the day's earlier darkness, his heart felt full, not because of the medal but because of the small hand holding his, the love of his daughter, and the warmth of a community that understood what really mattered on this Christmas Eve. The old grandfather clock in Daniel's living room chimed 9 times, its deep resonance mixing with the crackling of logs in the fireplace. Daniel sat in his worn leather armchair, watching as Lily carefully hung her red and white stocking on the mantel. Their modest home filled with the rich aroma of hot cocoa and the lingering scent of pine from their small Christmas tree. "Do you think Santa will like the cookies we made?" Lily asked, adjusting her stocking for the 3rd time. Her pink pajamas had little reindeers prancing across them, and her dark curls bounced as she moved. Daniel took a sip from his mug, savoring the warmth. "Those sugar cookies are your mom's recipe. Santa always loved them." His voice caught slightly at the mention of his late wife, but he smiled through it. "Remember how we used to find nothing but crumbs on the plate every Christmas morning?" Lily giggled, plopping down on their threadbare couch with her own mug of cocoa. Many marshmallows bobbed on the surface like tiny life rafts. "Daddy, do you think Santa knows we moved? What if he goes to our old house instead?" "Santa always knows where good children are," Daniel assured her, reaching over to wipe a chocolate mustache from her upper lip with his thumb. "Besides, you wrote him that very detailed letter with our new address." "And my map," Lily added proudly, "with the red X marking our house." The evening felt peaceful, a stark contrast to the turbulent day they'd had. Daniel's Medal of Honor ceremony at church still felt surreal, like something that had happened to someone else. The weight of the medal in his jacket pocket, however, was very real. A sharp knock at the door cut through their cozy moment. Daniel frowned, checking his watch. Who would be visiting this late on Christmas Eve? "Stay put, sweetheart," he said, setting down his mug. The floorboards creaked under his feet as he crossed to the door. When he opened it, the night air rushed in along with a few snowflakes, and there stood Vivien Hale. Her elegant black coat was dusted with snow, and her high heels seemed absurdly out of place on their humble front porch. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide her discomfort as she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Cole," she said, her breath visible in the cold air. "I hope I'm not interrupting your evening." Daniel's jaw tightened. "It's Christmas Eve, Miss Hale. I'm spending time with my daughter." Yes, of course. Vivien cleared her throat, her perfectly manicured hands fidgeting with her designer purse. I wanted to speak with you about what happened today, at the office. Hi, Miss Hale, Lily called from the couch, waving her small hand. Would you like some hot cocoa? Daddy makes it with extra marshmallows. Vivien's practiced smile faltered at the child's innocent offer. Oh, no thank you, She turned back to Daniel, lowering her voice. After the ceremony tonight, I realized there may have been a misunderstanding. The company would like to offer you your position back. With a raise, of course. Daniel stood straighter, his military bearing apparent even in his casual clothes. A misunderstanding? You mean firing a veteran on Christmas Eve wasn't good for the company's image? That's not what Vivien started, but Daniel cut her off. Miss Hale, you made it very clear this morning that my methods were outdated. That I didn't fit into your modern corporate vision. His voice remained calm but firm, aware of Lily watching from the couch. What's changed? The medal? The townspeople's reaction? Vivien's cheeks flushed pink against the cold. Mr. Cole, I'm trying to make this right. The board agrees that perhaps we acted hastily. You don't understand, do you? Daniel shook his head slowly. This isn't about a job, it's about honor. It's about family. It's about treating people with basic human dignity. He glanced back at Lily, who was watching the exchange with curious eyes. Those are values I want my daughter to learn. Values that seem to be in short supply at your company. How dare you question my values? Vivien's corporate mask cracked, revealing genuine anger. I built that company from nothing. I sacrificed everything to... That's exactly my point, Daniel interrupted quietly. You sacrificed everything, including your humanity. Vivien's mouth opened, then closed. For a moment, she looked lost, like a child herself. Then her walls slammed back into place, her expression hardening into the icy CEO persona once again. Fine, she snapped, turning sharply on her heel. Her expensive shoes sank into the slushy snow, making her stumble slightly. Merry Christmas, Mr. Cole. Daniel watched as she struggled to maintain her dignity, picking her way carefully through the snow toward her luxury car. Without another word, he closed the door firmly, shutting out the cold night air. Daddy? Lily's small voice came from behind him. Is Miss Hale sad? Daniel turned to find his daughter standing there, holding her cocoa mug with both hands. Her eyes were full of concern, reminding him so much of her mother that it made his heart ache. Sometimes, sweetheart, he said, walking back to their cozy living room, people forget what's really important, but that's not something you need to worry about tonight. He picked up his own mug, settling back into his chair. Now, where were we? Ah, yes. You were telling me about your very detailed map for Santa. The winter sun peeked through frost-covered windows as excited squeals echoed through the small house. Daddy, Daddy, Santa came! Lily bounced on Daniel's bed, her brown curls dancing with each movement. Wake up! There are presents! Daniel opened his eyes slowly, his heart warming at the sight of his daughter's joy. She wore her favorite Christmas pajamas, the ones with little reindeers that were slightly too short at the ankles now. Her eyes sparkled with pure happiness, reminding him so much of her mother. Okay, princess, I'm up, he chuckled, swinging his legs out of bed. Lily grabbed his hand, practically dragging him down the hallway to their modest living room. Under their small artificial tree sat a handful of carefully wrapped presents. Daniel had stayed up late, making sure each bow was perfect, each tag written in different handwriting to keep the Santa magic alive. He'd stretched his savings to make this Christmas special, despite everything. Look! Look! Lily dropped to her knees beside the tree, pointing at a medium-sized package wrapped in paper decorated with dancing snowmen. Can I open it? Go ahead, sweetheart. Daniel settled into his armchair, content to watch his daughter's excitement. Lily tore into the paper with delicate care, trying to preserve the pretty wrapping. Her gasp of delight filled the room as she revealed a plush elephant, soft gray with pink ears. It's just like the one at the store! She hugged it tight against her chest. I named her Eleanor. That's a beautiful name, Daniel smiled, remembering how Lily had pressed her nose against the toy store window for weeks, admiring that elephant. One by one, Lily opened her other presents. New colored pencils, a picture book about brave knights, warm mittens, and a handmade scarf Daniel's elderly neighbor had knitted. Though the pile was small, Lily treated each gift like treasure. Daddy, Open yours." Lily pushed a lumpy package wrapped in newspaper toward him. "I made it myself." Daniel carefully unwrapped it to find a clay picture frame, decorated with uneven hearts and stars painted in bright colors. Inside was a photo of him and Lily at the park last summer, both grinning at the camera with ice cream cones in hand. His throat tightened with emotion. "It's perfect, Lily. Thank you." He pulled her into a tight hug, kissing the top of her head. "Mrs. Martinez from next door helped me bake it in her oven," Lily explained proudly. "Do you really like it?" "I love it. It's the best present ever." The morning light grew stronger as they moved to the kitchen. Daniel mixed pancake batter while Lily sat at their small table, still clutching Eleanor the elephant. The familiar routine of measuring flour and cracking eggs helped settle his thoughts about the future. "How about some chocolate chips in these?" he asked, reaching for the bag he'd saved for a special occasion. "Yes, please." Lily bounced in her chair. "Can Eleanor have some too?" "Eleanor can have her very own pancake," Daniel agreed, pouring batter onto the griddle in the shape of a tiny circle. The kitchen filled with the warm scent of breakfast and the sound of Lily's giggles as she told Eleanor stories about Santa's reindeer. As they sat eating their chocolate chip pancakes, Daniel knew it was time to talk about the changes ahead. "Lily, remember how I'm not going back to my old job?" She nodded, syrup dripping from her fork. "Because Miss Hale wasn't very nice?" "Well, partly, but mainly because I think God has a different plan for us." He reached across the table to wipe a spot of syrup from her chin. "Remember Mr. Pete from church? The one who runs the Veterans Charity? The man with the funny mustache who gives you big hugs?" Daniel smiled. "That's right. Well, he's asked me to help him run the charity, to help other soldiers who need support, just like people helped us after Mommy went to heaven." Lily's face grew serious, the way it always did when they talked about her mother. "Will you help them get jobs and houses?" "Yes, and food and clothes too. Some of them have children, just like you." Lily's eyes widened. She slid off her chair and ran to her room, returning moments later with her arms full of toys. "Can we give these to their kids so they can have presents too?" Daniel's heart swelled with pride at his daughter's immediate generosity. "Are you sure? Some of these are your favorites." She nodded firmly, sorting through the pile. "Eleanor stays with me because she's brand new, but Sarah can have my other elephant, and Tommy doesn't play with blocks anymore, so these can go. And look," she held up a stack of coloring books. "I can share my old ones since Santa brought me new colored pencils." Daniel watched as his 7-year-old demonstrated more compassion than many adults he knew. "You're amazing, you know that? Just like you, Daddy." She beamed at him. "Can we take them now? Please? Let's finish breakfast first. Then we'll bundle up and head over." They finished their pancakes while making plans for which toys would go to which families they knew through the charity. Lily insisted on wrapping each item in the leftover Christmas paper, carefully printing "Merry Christmas" on each package in her best handwriting. After breakfast, Daniel helped Lily into her warm winter coat, wrapping her new scarf around her neck. He pulled on his own jacket and gathered up the bags of toys they'd prepared. Lily insisted on carrying a small bag herself, though it was almost as big as she was. "Ready?" Daniel asked, holding the door open. "Ready." Lily stepped out onto their small porch, her breath visible in the cold morning air. "Eleanor says she's excited to help make other kids happy on Christmas." "Eleanor sounds very wise," Daniel said, following his daughter into the crisp winter morning. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, turning their neighborhood into a peaceful wonderland. Their footprints would be the first to mark the pristine white blanket as they made their way to the charity. Looking down at his daughter's determined face as she marched through the snow, clutching her bag of toys and her new elephant, Daniel felt a surge of hope. Maybe losing his job wasn't an ending, but a beginning. A chance to show Lily that sometimes life's biggest challenges could lead to the most meaningful rewards. They walked together through the quiet Christmas morning, their arms full of toys and their hearts full of purpose. The community center buzzed with holiday cheer as families filled every corner of the large room. Festive decorations hung from the ceiling, and a massive Christmas tree stood proudly in the center, surrounded by piles of wrapped presents. Christmas carols played softly in the background, nearly drowned out by the happy chatter of volunteers and visitors. Daniel and Lily worked side by side at one of the gift distribution tables. Their own donations sat in a box beside them, carefully wrapped the night before. Lily wore her red Christmas sweater and a Santa hat that kept slipping over her eyes, making her giggle every time she had to push it back up. "Here you go," Daniel said warmly, handing a wrapped package to a young boy about Lily's age. The child's face lit up as he clutched the gift to his chest. "Merry Christmas." Lily beamed at each person who approached their table, her natural warmth drawing smiles from even the shyest children. "This one has puppies on it," she exclaimed, carefully selecting a blue-wrapped package for a little girl in pigtails. "Do you like puppies too?" The happiness in the room was contagious. Daniel felt his spirits lifting with each gift given, each smile exchanged. This was so different from his corporate job. Here, he could see the direct impact of his work in people's eyes. Even the memory of yesterday's firing seemed distant now, softened by the joy around him. But then the room's energy shifted. Cameras started flashing near the entrance, and Daniel's heart sank as he recognized the clicking of familiar heels on the linoleum floor. Vivien Hale had arrived, dressed immaculately in a designer red coat, surrounded by photographers, and looking every bit the successful CEO doing her charitable duty. Daniel turned away, focusing intently on organizing the remaining presents. He couldn't help but notice how Vivien posed with carefully selected children, her smile practiced and perfect for the cameras. Everything about it felt staged, calculated, the opposite of the genuine warmth flowing through the rest of the room. "Look, Daddy," Lily tugged at his sleeve, pointing to a basket of candy canes on their table. "We forgot to hand these out too." Before Daniel could respond, Lily had grabbed a handful of candy canes and was weaving through the crowd. His heart stopped when he realized where she was heading. "Lily, wait." But she was already approaching Vivien, holding out a striped candy cane with innocent enthusiasm. "Merry Christmas," Lily called out, her voice clear and sweet above the noise. "Would you like one? They're peppermint." The photographers turned their cameras toward this unexpected interaction. Vivien stood frozen for a moment, her perfect pose slipping as she looked down at the little girl who had interrupted her photo opportunity. Something flickered across her face, surprise, uncertainty, and perhaps a hint of genuine emotion breaking through her polished exterior. Then, to everyone's surprise, Vivien knelt down to Lily's level, her expensive coat pooling around her on the floor. She seemed to forget about the cameras as she accepted the candy cane from Lily's small hand. "Thank you," she said softly, her usual sharp tone notably absent. "You're welcome," Lily replied cheerfully. "Do you want to come sit with me and Daddy? We're helping give out presents, and it's really fun." She pointed toward their table, where Daniel stood rigid with tension. Vivien's eyes met Daniel's across the room. He gave her a warning look, but Lily was already tugging at Vivien's hand. "Please? We have lots of pretty presents left to give away." Daniel watched the internal struggle play across Vivien's face. For a moment, her carefully constructed facade cracked completely, revealing something vulnerable underneath. She glanced at the photographers, then back at Lily's hopeful expression. Yes, I suppose I could help for a little while," Vivien said hesitantly. Lily practically bounced with excitement, leading Vivien back to their table. Daniel's jaw clenched, but he couldn't bring himself to disappoint his daughter. The photographers followed, their cameras clicking rapidly at this unexpected scene. The CEO, the veteran she'd fired, and his cheerful daughter all together at the charity event. "You can help me pick out the perfect presents," Lily instructed Vivien, who looked comically out of place beside their modest gift table. "See? This one has stars on it, and this one has bells." Daniel watched as Vivien awkwardly settled onto one of the folding chairs, her designer coat brushing against the worn linoleum floor. She held the candy cane in her manicured hands like she wasn't quite sure what to do with it. Lily continued chattering away, oblivious to the tension between the adults. "Smile," called out one of the photographers, and before anyone could object, the camera flashed. The moment was captured. Lily beaming in her crooked Santa hat, Vivien with an unusually genuine half-smile, still holding her candy cane, and Daniel standing beside them with an unreadable expression, surrounded by Christmas presents and the warm glow of holiday lights. The flash seemed to break some sort of spell. Vivien blinked, her professional mask starting to slip back into place. But before she could fully retreat behind her usual cold demeanor, Lily handed her another present to give away, and something in Vivien's eyes softened again as she looked at the child's eager face. Daniel watched it all, torn between his instinct to protect Lily from disappointment and his amazement at how his daughter's simple kindness had momentarily cracked through Vivien's icy exterior. The camera flash went off again, freezing another candid moment of their unlikely Christmas morning trio. Daniel sat at his kitchen table early the next morning, coffee growing cold beside him as he stared at the newspaper. There it was, splashed across the front page in bold letters: War Hero and CEO Unite at Toy Drive. The photo showed him, Lily and Vivien Hale gathered around a pile of toys, his daughter's innocent smile beaming between them. His jaw clenched. The article painted a rosy picture of cooperation and community spirit, completely ignoring how Vivien had fired him just days ago. She looked perfectly poised in the photo, her designer coat immaculate, while he wore his worn winter jacket. The contrast made his blood boil. "Daddy, is that us in the paper?" Lily padded into the kitchen in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Her face lit up when she saw the picture. "Look how pretty Miss Vivien looks. And there's my candy cane." Daniel forced a smile. "Yes, sweetheart, that's us." He couldn't bring himself to dampen her enthusiasm. The phone rang, making him jump. He checked the caller ID and frowned. Speak of the devil. After 3 rings, he finally answered. "Mr. Cole." Vivian's crisp voice came through. "I assume you've seen this morning's paper. Using a children's charity for damage control?" Daniel kept his voice low, glancing at Lily, who was now happily pouring cereal. "That's low, even for you." "This isn't about PR," Vivien replied, though her tone wasn't entirely convincing. "The community expects us to work together now. The mayor called me this morning. They want both of us at the charity dinner next week." Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose. "Not interested." "Think about it logically," Vivien pressed on. "Your presence brings credibility. My connections bring funding. The Veterans Charity needs both." "Daddy?" Lily tugged at his sleeve, pointing to the newspaper. "Can we go help more kids with Miss Vivien? She gave me 2 candy canes yesterday." Daniel covered the phone speaker. "Just eat your breakfast, sweetie." To Vivien, he said, "You don't understand what it means to serve others. This isn't a photo opportunity." "Perhaps not," Vivien admitted, her voice softening slightly. "But I'm trying to learn. The charity dinner could raise enough money to help dozens of veteran families. Isn't that worth enduring my company for one evening?" Daniel watched Lily humming happily over her cereal bowl, still admiring the newspaper photo. He thought of the other veterans' children, many in situations far worse than his own. His personal feelings about Vivien shouldn't matter if this could help them. "Fine," he said finally. "One dinner. But we do this properly. No cameras, no press releases, just honest work for the cause." "Agreed," Vivien said quickly, almost eagerly. "The dinner is next Thursday at 7. I'll have my assistant send you the details." "I'll need to bring Lily," Daniel added. "I don't have a sitter." There was a pause on the line. "Of course. That's fine." After hanging up, Daniel slumped in his chair. What had he gotten himself into? Lily bounced over to him, her small face full of excitement. "Are we going to see Miss Vivien again?" she asked hopefully. "Yes, Pumpkin. Next week at a special dinner." Lily clapped her hands. "Yay! She smells like flowers, and her hair is so pretty. Can I wear my Christmas dress?" Daniel couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm, even as his own stomach churned with dread. "Sure thing, sweetheart. Your red dress will be perfect." He watched his daughter skip away to get dressed, her joy infectious despite his reservations. The newspaper still lay open on the table, that photo mocking him with its false narrative of harmony. But looking at it again, he noticed something he'd missed before. The way Vivien was looking not at the camera, but at Lily. There was something almost soft in her expression, so different from her usual icy demeanor. Moving to the living room, Daniel picked up the framed photo of his late wife from the mantel. "What would you think of all this, Sarah?" he whispered. The smiling face in the photo offered no answers, but he could almost hear her telling him to put aside his pride for the greater good. His phone buzzed. A text from Vivien's assistant with the dinner details. Everything was happening so fast. Just days ago, he'd been carrying his belongings out of her office in a box, and now they were supposed to work together? "Daddy!" Lily called from her room. "Can you help me pick out a headband for school?" "Coming, sweetie." Daniel set down his wife's photo and headed to Lily's room. He found her surrounded by colorful headbands, considering each one with adorable seriousness. "The blue one matches your eyes," he suggested, kneeling beside her. "Like Miss Vivien's eyes?" Lily asked innocently. "They're blue too," Daniel sighed inwardly. "Yes, like Miss Vivien's." He helped Lily with the headband, marveling at how children could see past adult complications to find simple connections. Back in the kitchen, he finally took a sip of his now cold coffee and looked at the newspaper one last time. The charity dinner would be a challenge, but maybe, just maybe, some good could come from this uncomfortable alliance. If nothing else, it would make his daughter happy. Another day with Miss Vivien, Lily sang as she twirled through the kitchen in her school clothes. It's going to be the best! Daniel watched her dance around, her joy untainted by adult concerns about pride or politics. He couldn't help but wonder if her innocent heart saw something in Vivien Hale that his wounded pride wouldn't let him see. We'll see, sweetheart, he said softly. We'll see. The community center buzzed with warmth and chatter as volunteers hustled around setting up tables for the charity dinner. Steam rose from silver serving trays filled with turkey, mashed potatoes, and green beans. The smell of fresh bread and cinnamon wafted through the air. Daniel adjusted his apron and grabbed a serving spoon, his jaw tight as he watched Vivien across the room. She wore a designer dress that probably cost more than his monthly rent, though she'd at least had the sense to throw an apron over it. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped efficiently on her tablet as she logged donations at a table decorated with twinkling lights. Remember to smile, he muttered to himself, forcing his expression to soften as the first guests began filing through the line. Many were veterans he knew from support groups, along with local families who had fallen on hard times. Each familiar face reminded him why he was here and why he couldn't let Vivien's presence ruin the evening. How are you holding up, brother? Asked Mike, an older veteran missing his left arm, as Daniel spooned gravy onto his plate. Doing fine, Daniel replied, meaning it despite everything. Good to see you here. Their easy conversation was interrupted by Lily's excited voice carrying across the room. Miss Vivien, come help us serve food. It's more fun than sitting at a table. Daniel glanced over to see his daughter tugging on Vivien's sleeve. The CEO's eyes widened in obvious discomfort. Oh, I don't think that's necessary, Vivien said stiffly. I'm quite busy with the donations. Please? Lily's eyes sparkled with hope. Daddy says helping others makes your heart bigger. Don't you want a bigger heart? A few nearby volunteers poorly concealed their smiles. Vivien's cheeks flushed pink, the first genuine emotion Daniel had seen from her. I suppose, she began uncertainly, I could help for a little while. Daniel bit back a groan as Vivien made her way to the serving line, accepting a ladle from a beaming Lily. Her first attempt at serving soup splashed messily onto a plate. Sorry, she mumbled, clearly mortified. I'm not very good at this. Here, Daniel found himself saying, despite his better judgment. Hold it closer to the plate and tip it slowly. He demonstrated with his own ladle. Vivien watched intently and tried again. This time the soup landed neatly in the bowl. A tiny smile tugged at her lips. Not her usual calculated business smile, but something smaller and more genuine. As the evening progressed, Daniel noticed subtle changes in Vivien's demeanor. Her shoulders gradually relaxed. She started making eye contact with the guests instead of just mechanically serving food. When an elderly woman thanked her warmly, Vivien's "You're welcome" actually sounded sincere. You're doing great, Miss Vivien, Lily chirped, bouncing on her toes as she handed out rolls. Isn't this fun? It's different, Vivien admitted. She glanced at Daniel. I've never done anything like this before. Never served others? Daniel couldn't resist asking, though he kept his tone neutral for Lily's sake. Vivien's lips pressed together. My family believed in writing checks, not getting our hands dirty. She paused, then added quietly, maybe we were wrong. Before Daniel could respond, someone started playing piano. The familiar notes of Silent Night filled the room, and people began to sing. Daniel watched as Lily grabbed both his and Vivien's hands, swinging them gently as she joined in with her clear child's voice. To his surprise, he noticed Vivien's lips moving slightly, forming the words. Her usual mask of cool efficiency had slipped, revealing something softer underneath. For just a moment, in the glow of Christmas lights and surrounded by voices raised in song, she looked almost human. The crack in her armor vanished quickly when she caught him watching. She dropped Lily's hand and straightened her spine, though she couldn't quite manage to look as imperious as usual with gravy stains on her apron. Silent night, holy night. The voices swelled around them. Daniel saw tears in the eyes of some of the veterans, felt the way the music bound everyone together, rich and poor, broken and whole. even a hardened CEO and the man she'd fired. For one brief moment, all the sharp edges between them softened in the gentle night. In the end, however, it was just a moment. As the last notes faded away, Daniel found himself wondering if such moments could really change anything at all. The singing ended, and Vivien cleared her throat. "I should get back to the donation table," she said briskly, though her voice wasn't quite as frosty as usual. She untied her apron with efficient movements. "But Miss Vivien," Lily protested. "We still have more people to serve." "Lily," Daniel said gently. "Miss Hale has other responsibilities." He met Vivien's eyes briefly. "Thank you for helping." She nodded once, already retreating behind her professional facade. Yet as she walked back to her table, Daniel noticed she was humming Silent Night under her breath, perhaps without even realizing it. The charity dinner wound down as volunteers stacked chairs and wrapped leftover food. In a quiet corner of the community center, Lily had fallen asleep on 3 plastic chairs pushed together, her small form wrapped in Daniel's coat. He gathered dirty plates while keeping an eye on her peaceful face. "I can give you both a ride home," Vivien said, appearing beside him. She had removed her apron, revealing her expensive black dress beneath. "It's too cold to walk, and she's already asleep." Daniel glanced outside at the swirling snow, then back at Lily. His truck was in the shop again, and the thought of waking his daughter to walk 6 blocks in this weather made his chest tight. "Fine," he said curtly. "Thank you." Vivien's black luxury SUV sat alone in the parking lot, its heated seats and leather interior a stark contrast to his usual transportation. Daniel carefully placed Lily in the back seat, buckling her in while she mumbled something about Christmas cookies in her sleep. The first few minutes passed in tense silence as Vivien navigated the empty streets. Christmas lights twinkled from houses they passed, and carols played softly on the radio. "You did well tonight," Vivien said finally, her eyes fixed on the road. "The veterans really responded to you." "Because I understand them," Daniel replied. "Leadership isn't about fancy speeches or profit margins. It's about being in the trenches with your people." Vivien's perfectly manicured hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I lead my company successfully. Our profits are up 30% since I took over." "At what cost?" Daniel turned to face her. "You fired a dozen people right before Christmas. People with families, with children. Business requires tough decisions. Not everyone understands that. No, what you don't understand is real sacrifice." The words spilled out before he could stop them. "You want to know about tough decisions? Try holding your best friend while he bleeds out in the desert, knowing if you'd been 10 seconds faster, he might have lived." Vivien's breath caught audibly. For once, she didn't immediately counter with a sharp response. Daniel's voice grew rough with memory. "His name was Mike. We grew up together in this town, joined up together. He had a little girl, just like Lily. That last day, we were clearing buildings when the sniper fire started. I was point man. It should have been me." He stared out at the falling snow, seeing instead the harsh sun and sand of that terrible day. "I had to write to his wife, had to explain why her daughter would grow up without a father." The only sound was the soft whir of the heater and Lily's gentle breathing from the back seat. "That's what real responsibility means," Daniel continued quietly. "Not numbers on a spreadsheet, but lives in your hands. People who trust you to do right by them, no matter what it costs you personally." Vivien drove in silence for several blocks, her usual mask of cool efficiency cracked by something that looked like uncertainty. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. "I didn't know." "No, you didn't. You never asked. You just saw another expendable employee, another way to trim the budget." They pulled up in front of Daniel's modest home. Christmas lights hung somewhat crookedly along the porch. Lily had insisted on helping put them up, and a small wreath decorated the door. "I'll get her," Daniel said, unbuckling his seatbelt. He opened the back door carefully and gathered Lily in his arms. She snuggled against his chest, still deep in dreams. Through the windshield, Vivien watched as Daniel carried his daughter up the snow-dusted walk. He balanced Lily carefully while unlocking the door, then disappeared inside. A moment later, warm light filled an upstairs window. She could see his silhouette moving, tucking Lily into bed with gentle movements that spoke of years of practice and boundless love. The scene stirred something uncomfortable in Vivien's chest, a feeling she couldn't quite name. She sat there long after the upstairs light went out, her car idling in the silent street, before finally putting it in drive and pulling away into the snowy night. Behind her, Christmas lights twinkled on the modest house, while inside, a father and daughter slept peacefully, rich in the things that truly mattered. The winter morning sun barely warmed the charity's worn brick building as Daniel sorted through boxes of donated clothes. His breath made little clouds in the cold air. The heating system was acting up again. A few veterans helped him, their faces familiar after weeks of volunteering together. The front door creaked open, letting in a blast of icy air. Daniel looked up, expecting another donation drop-off. Instead, Vivien Hale stood in the doorway, wearing plain black slacks and a simple sweater, a far cry from her usual designer suits. No cameras followed her. No PR team hovered nearby. "What are you doing here?" Daniel asked, his voice guarded. Vivien shifted uncomfortably. "I came to help." She glanced around the room, taking in the peeling paint and mismatched furniture. "If that's allowed?" Daniel studied her for a long moment. The veterans around him had gone quiet, watching the exchange. Finally, he pointed to a stack of boxes. "Those need sorting. Winter clothes on the left, summer on the right." Vivien nodded and walked over to the boxes. She hesitated only briefly before kneeling down on the concrete floor, her expensive slacks touching the dusty surface. She pulled open the first box and began sorting methodically. Throughout the morning, Daniel kept a wary eye on her. But Vivien worked steadily, asking few questions and making no complaints. When an elderly veteran shuffled in looking for a warm coat, she helped him find one that fit, listening patiently as he told stories about his service years. By lunchtime, the temperature had risen enough that they could feel their fingers again. The veterans gathered around a table with sandwiches from the local deli. Daniel noticed Vivien hanging back, uncertain. "Grab a sandwich," he called out, surprising himself. "You've earned it." She joined them cautiously, perching on the edge of a folding chair. One of the older veterans, Mike, started talking about his grandkids. Then Jerry, a former Marine, shared memories about Christmas during his deployment. "Hardest part wasn't the fighting," Jerry said, his weathered face serious. "It was missing home, missing family." Daniel saw something flicker across Vivien's face. Recognition, maybe even pain. She leaned forward slightly. Did you have children waiting?" Jerry nodded, pulling out his wallet to show her a worn photo. "3 of them. Missed 4 Christmases straight." He looked at her directly. "But my company back then, they took care of my family while I was gone. Made sure my kids had presents under the tree." Vivien's hands twisted in her lap. "That must have meant everything." "It did." Jerry's voice was gentle but firm. "Sometimes the biggest heroes aren't the ones in uniform. They're the ones who remember we're human beings first, soldiers second." The afternoon brought more veterans seeking help. Vivien worked alongside Daniel, her earlier stiffness gradually melting away. She listened as each person shared their story. About struggling to find work. About nightmares that wouldn't fade. About feeling forgotten. At one point, a young veteran broke down crying while describing his difficulty adjusting to civilian life. Instead of backing away awkwardly, Vivien sat with him, offering tissues and her full attention. Daniel watched from across the room, seeing something change in her face with each story she heard. Near closing time, they worked together stacking the last boxes. The other volunteers had gone home, leaving them alone in the quiet building. "Why did you really come today?" Daniel asked, unable to contain his curiosity any longer. Vivien paused, her hands resting on a box of folded blankets. "I thought I knew what leadership meant," she said slowly. "Efficiency, results. But today," she gestured around the room, "these people have shown me what real strength looks like. What real sacrifice means." She met his eyes. "I was wrong about a lot of things." Daniel studied her face, seeing genuine emotion there for the first time. The sharp edges he'd come to expect from her had softened. He thought about how she'd worked without complaint, how she'd really listened to each person who came through the door. "Maybe," he said carefully, "you're not just here for the publicity after all." A small, real smile touched Vivien's lips. Not her usual polished corporate smile, but something more genuine. For a moment, the tension between them eased, replaced by something that felt almost like understanding. The heating system rattled to life, breaking the moment. But as they finished cleaning up in companionable silence, Daniel found himself wondering if perhaps there was more to Vivien Hale than he'd initially thought. The community center's main hall glowed with warmth on this special evening. Strings of white lights crisscrossed the ceiling, and evergreen garlands wrapped with red ribbons decorated the walls. Round tables draped in crisp white cloths filled the space, each one crowned with a centerpiece of pine branches, candy canes, and flickering candles. The room buzzed with cheerful conversation as families gathered for the charity's Christmas dinner. Children darted between tables, their fancy clothes slightly rumpled from play. Veterans sat together in groups, sharing stories and laughter, their medals gleaming in the soft light. Volunteers moved efficiently, serving plates heaped with turkey, mashed potatoes, and all the traditional fixings. Daniel stood near the kitchen entrance, watching it all with quiet satisfaction. He wore his best blue suit, the one he usually saved for church, and his Medal of Honor hung respectfully at his collar. Lily sat at a table near the front, her green velvet dress making her look like a Christmas elf as she chatted with other children. Silent Night played softly from hidden speakers, and the scent of cinnamon and pine filled the air. Some of the older veterans had tears in their eyes as they looked around at the gathering, remembering perhaps their own holidays spent far from home. Vivien sat at the head table, looking elegant but unusually nervous in a deep red dress. She kept smoothing her napkin and glancing at her phone. Daniel noticed her uncharacteristic fidgeting and wondered what was bothering the usually composed CEO. As the main course dishes were being cleared, Vivien suddenly stood up. She tapped her water glass with a spoon, the clear ring cutting through the chatter. The room gradually fell silent as all eyes turned to her. She cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable with showing vulnerability. "I'd like to say something, if I may." Daniel crossed his arms, preparing himself for another corporate speech about image and community involvement. But what came next surprised him completely. "When I first came to this charity, it was for all the wrong reasons," Vivien admitted, her voice growing stronger. "I thought I understood success. I thought I knew what mattered in life. But these past few days have taught me how wrong I was." She turned to look directly at Daniel, her eyes bright with emotion. "In this room tonight, we have true heroes. Men and women who put their lives on the line for others. People like Daniel Cole." Daniel felt his chest tighten as she continued. "Many of you know Daniel as the quiet man who helps run this place. What you might not know is that he earned the Congressional Medal of Honor for running into enemy fire to save his entire unit. He carried 3 wounded men to safety while injured himself." Her voice cracked slightly. "That's the kind of man he island, always putting others first." Lily beamed up at her father from her seat, pride shining in her young face. "I had the privilege, though I didn't know it at the time of working with Daniel, and I made the terrible mistake of not seeing his true worth." Vivien's hands trembled slightly as she reached into her purse. "I can't undo past mistakes, but I can try to make things right." She pulled out an envelope. "This is a personal check from me, not my company, not a corporate donation for $500,000 to support this charity's work with veterans." A collective gasp went through the room. Daniel's eyes widened in shock. "It's not just about the money," Vivien continued quickly. "I'm also committing my time, my resources, and my heart to this cause. Because Daniel, and all of you, have taught me what real courage looks like, what real leadership means." She smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her usual sharp features into something softer. "Thank you for showing me that true strength isn't about power, it's about service." The room erupted in applause. Veterans stood up, clapping and whistling. Some wiped tears from their eyes. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Lily jumped up from her seat and ran straight to Vivien, throwing her arms around the woman's waist. Vivien stiffened for a moment, then slowly relaxed, placing her hands gently on Lily's shoulders. The little girl looked up at her with shining eyes. "Thank you for helping Daddy's friends," Lily said loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Vivien knelt down to Lily's level, something that would have been unthinkable just days ago. She didn't seem to care that her expensive dress touched the floor, or that everyone was watching. "No, sweetheart," she said softly. "Thank you for helping me see what really matters." More applause broke out at this exchange. Someone started singing, "God Bless America," and others joined in. The sound swelled until it filled every corner of the room. Vivien stood up, still holding Lily's hand. For the first time since Daniel had known her, she wasn't trying to control her image or calculate her next move. Her smile reached her eyes, creating tiny laugh lines that made her look younger, more real. She looked happy. Truly happy. As the singing continued, Vivien's gaze met Daniel's across the candlelit hall. The usual walls were down, the sharp edges softened. Something passed between them in that moment, understanding, perhaps, or the beginning of forgiveness, maybe even something more. Daniel found himself letting go of old anger as he looked at her. The flickering candlelight caught the tears in her eyes, making them sparkle like the Christmas lights above. She wasn't the same woman who had fired him in that cold office. This was someone new, someone who had found her heart. They held each other's gaze as the music swelled around them, neither looking away, neither wanting to break whatever unspoken thing was growing in the space between them. The morning sun cast long shadows through the frosted windows of Vivien's corner office. She sat rigid in her leather chair, staring at the email on her screen. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the board's message for the third time. Ms. Hale, your recent public appearances with Daniel Cole and your substantial personal donation to his charity have raised serious concerns among the board members. This behavior is unbecoming of a CEO and threatens to destabilize shareholder confidence. Distance yourself immediately, or we will be forced to reconsider your position. Vivien's throat tightened. She glanced at her phone, where dozens of missed calls from board members awaited her response. The newspaper from yesterday's dinner sat on her desk, showing a photo of her smiling genuinely with Daniel and Lily. It felt like a lifetime ago. Her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Miss Hale, the board chairman is requesting an emergency meeting in 30 minutes. Cancel it, Vivien snapped, grabbing her coat. Cancel everything. She drove to the charity center, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. The old brick building looked different now, not warm and inviting like yesterday, but threatening. Inside, she found Daniel sorting through donation boxes with several volunteers. We need to talk, she said sharply. Privately, Daniel looked up, concern crossing his face at her tone. He followed her to a small office in the back, closing the door behind them. This has to stop, Vivien began, pacing the cramped space. All of it. The charity work, the public appearances, everything. Daniel crossed his arms. What happened? What happened? Vivien's voice rose. What happened is that you've completely derailed my career. The board is threatening to remove me because of all this charity nonsense. Nonsense? Daniel's voice was quiet but firm. Helping veterans and their families is nonsense to you? Don't twist my words. Vivien ran her fingers through her hair in frustration. I built this company from nothing. I worked 18-hour days for 15 years to get where I am. And now, because of you and your sob story, I'm about to lose everything. Daniel took a step back, his expression hardening. My sob story? You mean serving my country? Losing my wife? Raising my daughter alone? Oh, please! Vivien's words turned bitter with fear. You've turned this whole town against me with your perfect hero act. The humble veteran, the devoted father. You're ruining everything I've worked for. Her voice echoed in the small office. Neither of them had noticed the door crack open slightly during their argument. I didn't do anything to you, Vivien, Daniel said quietly. You're the one who chose to help. You're the one who gave that speech last night. Nobody forced you. Well, it was clearly a mistake. Vivien's voice cracked with emotion. I should have fired you months ago. I should never have let your daughter manipulate me with her sweet act and her stupid candy canes. A small gasp came from the doorway. They both turned to see Lily standing there, her eyes wide and filling with tears. She clutched a drawing she'd made for Vivien in her small hands. Lily. Vivien's anger drained away instantly, replaced by horror. But it was too late. The little girl's face crumpled, and she turned and ran down the hallway, her footsteps echoing against the old wooden floors. Lily, wait, Daniel called after her, but she was already gone. He could hear her sobs fading as she fled to the small room they'd set up as her play area. Daniel turned back to Vivien, his face a mask of pain and disappointment. When he spoke, his voice was low and heavy with finality. Get out, he said simply, and don't come back. Ever. Vivien stood frozen, the full weight of what she'd done crashing down around her. She opened her mouth to speak, but Daniel held up his hand. Just go, he said, already turning away from her to follow his daughter. Vivien stumbled backward, her heel catching on the threshold. The same threshold she'd crossed so many times in the past few days, feeling increasingly at home. Now it felt like a barrier she'd never cross again. She walked quickly through the main room, past the volunteers who had surely heard everything. Their faces showed a mixture of disappointment and judgment. The warmth and acceptance she'd felt here had shattered like thin ice beneath her feet. The winter air hit her face as she pushed through the front door, but she barely felt it. Her perfectly ordered world had crumbled, and this time, she had no one to blame but herself. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence of the house. Daniel sat at the worn wooden table, his hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee he couldn't bring himself to drink. Upstairs, Lily's muffled sobs had finally quieted, but each echo of her crying had felt like a knife in his heart. The Christmas lights from their small tree in the corner cast shifting shadows on the wall. Just yesterday, those same lights had seemed magical. Now they only reminded him of how quickly joy could turn to pain. "I should have known better," he whispered to himself, running his fingers through his hair. The military had taught him to be cautious, to assess situations carefully, but he'd let his guard down, allowed Vivien into their lives, into their safe little world. He could still see the hurt in Lily's eyes when Vivien had lashed out. His daughter had grown so attached over these past few days, seeing something in Vivien that perhaps wasn't really there. Or maybe it was there, just not strong enough to overcome her attachment to power and status. The wind rattled the kitchen window, and Daniel stood up, his chair scraping against the linoleum floor. He walked to the sink, dumping out the cold coffee and bracing his hands against the counter. The dishes from their half-eaten dinner sat unwashed, something he never allowed. But tonight, he couldn't focus on routine. "Sarah," he whispered, thinking of his late wife. "I wish you were here. You always knew what to do." His voice cracked slightly. "I don't know how to fix this for her." The house creaked and settled around him, familiar sounds that usually brought comfort. But tonight, every noise seemed to emphasize their solitude. He glanced at the refrigerator, covered in Lily's artwork. A new drawing hung there, one she'd made just yesterday, showing 3 figures: herself, Daniel, and Vivien, all holding hands under a bright yellow sundae. Daniel pulled the drawing down gently, studying it. Lily had even drawn Vivien's business suit, though she'd added a string of hearts around the CEO's neck like a necklace. His daughter's ability to see the best in people was usually a blessing. Tonight, it felt like a curse. He walked through the dark living room, past the Christmas tree with its humble decorations. Most were handmade, painted pine cones, paper chains, and ornaments Lily had created at school. Simple things, but they'd always been enough. Until Vivien had swept into their lives with her designer clothes and corporate power, making their modest life seem somehow lacking. The old floorboards creaked as he climbed the stairs, pausing outside Lily's room. He pushed the door open slowly, letting the hallway light spill across her small bed. Lily lay curled up tight, still wearing her day clothes, her face tear-stained even in sleep. Her favorite stuffed bear had fallen to the floor. Daniel picked up the bear, gently tucking it next to her. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," he whispered, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. Back downstairs, he paced the living room, unable to settle. The Congressional Medal of Honor caught his eye, displayed on the mantel where the mayor had insisted it belonged. Daniel walked over, picking it up, feeling its weight in his hands. The medal reminded him of choices, hard choices made in desperate moments. He'd earned it by running into enemy fire to save his unit, not because he was fearless, but because it was right. Because sometimes the hardest path was the only honorable one. His fingers traced the star pattern on the medal's surface. The weight of it felt heavy tonight, like it carried not just the memory of his actions in combat, but the responsibility to keep making the right choices now. To protect Lily, but also to show her what integrity looked like, even when it hurt. The room felt suddenly stuffy, confining. Daniel grabbed his coat from the hook by the door and stepped out onto the front porch. Snow was falling again, big flakes drifting lazily in the glow of the streetlights. His breath fogged in the cold air as he leaned against the porch railing. The medal was still in his hand, and he held it up, watching the snow fall past it. In the distance, church bells chimed the late hour, the sound carrying clearly in the winter air. Daniel closed his eyes, letting the familiar weight of the medal ground him, as he prayed silently for guidance. He thought about the men he'd served with, how they'd all carried each other through the darkest times. About Sarah, and how she taught him that love meant being strong enough to be gentle. About Lily, who saw the good in everyone, even when it was buried deep. A car drove past slowly, its headlights cutting through the falling snow, momentarily illuminating the metal in his hand. The light caught the metal and reflected briefly, like a star in the darkness, before fading away. Daniel turned back toward the house, looking through the window at the metals place on the mantel where it belonged. He took a deep breath of the sharp winter air, gathering his strength, preparing to face whatever tomorrow would bring. Upstairs in her small bedroom, Lily Cole sat cross-legged on her pink-flowered bedspread, her favorite stuffed bear tucked under one arm. Tears still dampened her cheeks, but determination shone in her eyes as she pulled out her special writing paper, the one with rainbow butterflies along the edges that her father had given her for Christmas. She grabbed her purple glitter pen and began to write, her 7-year-old handwriting careful and deliberate. "Dear Miss Vivien, I know you're mad at Daddy, but I need to tell you something important. It's about my mommy." Lily paused, hugging her bear tighter. The house was quiet, except for the distant sound of her father moving around downstairs. She took a deep breath and continued writing. "Mommy got very sick when I was little. Daddy says she was the bravest person he ever knew because she kept smiling even when it hurt. She told me to always be kind, even when it's hard. Before she went to heaven, she made Daddy promise to keep me safe and happy. And he does. He works so hard. Sometimes I hear him crying at night when he thinks I'm asleep, but in the morning he always makes me pancakes with funny faces." Lily wiped her eyes with her sleeve, but kept writing. "Daddy doesn't like to talk about being a hero in the war, but I heard the mayor say he saved lots of people. That's what heroes do. They help others, even when it's scary. Like when you helped at the charity. You looked scared at first, but then you smiled for real, not like your TV smile. I saw how happy Daddy was when you were nice to everyone. He hasn't smiled that much since Mommy left, but today you made him sad again. You made his eyes look empty, like they do on Mommy's birthday." She reached for a fresh sheet of paper, her small hand trembling slightly. "Miss Vivien, I know grown-ups have hard choices. Daddy says that all the time. But Mommy also said that being kind is always the right choice. You were starting to be kind. Please don't stop. Heroes deserve kindness too. Daddy is a hero, not just because of his medal, but because he takes care of everyone. He makes sure the other veterans have warm coats. He helps Mrs. Johnson carry her groceries even though his leg hurts sometimes from the war. He never forgets to check under my bed for monsters. Please don't hurt him again. He pretends to be strong all the time, but I know his heart can break. Mommy said, hearts are like glass. They can break, but they can also shine and make beautiful rainbows if you let the light in." Lily pulled out one final sheet, her words flowing faster now. "I thought maybe you could be part of our family. Not like Mommy. No one can replace her. But like an aunt, maybe. Daddy says family means you never give up on each other, even when things get hard. I'm sorry the people at your company are mean to you. Daddy says sometimes people forget what really matters. But you remembered when you were helping at the charity. Your eyes got soft, like Mommy's in the pictures. Please remember that feeling. Please don't let the mean people make you forget how to be kind again. Love, Lily Cole. P.S. I still have the candy cane you gave me at the toy drive. I'm saving it because it reminds me of your real smile." Lily carefully folded the pages and slipped them into an envelope. She wrote Miss Vivien Hale on the front in her best handwriting, adding a small heart over the I. From her desk drawer, she pulled out the Christmas stamp her father had given her for her cards to Santa. The floor creaked outside her door. Lily quickly tucked the envelope under her pillow as Daniel poked his head in. "Time for bed, sweetheart," he said softly. "Big day tomorrow. 5 more minutes, Daddy?" "Please?" Lily asked, giving him her best puppy dog eyes. Daniel's tired face softened. "Okay. 5 minutes. But then it's lights out." After he left, Lily retrieved the envelope and added one final touch. A small drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands. A tall one with short hair, a little one with pigtails, and a middle one with long hair and high heels. She placed the envelope carefully in her backpack for tomorrow, then changed into her pajamas. When Daniel returned, she let him tuck her in without protest. "I love you, Daddy. she whispered as he kissed her forehead. "I love you too, princess. More than all the stars in the sky." After he turned out the light, Lily lay awake for a long time, holding her bear close and praying that her letter would help fix what was broken. The next morning, while Daniel was busy making breakfast in the kitchen, she could smell the pancakes already. Lily crept downstairs with her backpack. She pulled on her winter boots and coat as quietly as she could. "Just getting the mail, Daddy!" she called out, hearing him flip a pancake. "Okay, honey, hurry back before these get cold." Lily stepped out into the crisp morning air. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, making everything look clean and new. She trudged through the white powder to the mailbox at the end of their driveway, her letter clutched tightly in her mittened hand. Standing on tiptoe, she carefully slipped the envelope into the mailbox and raised the red flag. She patted the cold metal gently. "Please find her," she whispered to the letter, then turned and hurried back inside where warmth and her father's love waited. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Vivien Hale's corner office, casting long shadows across her pristine desk. She sat rigid in her leather chair, her fingers trembling as she held the envelope. The return address was written in crooked, childish handwriting. Lily Cole. Vivien's throat tightened. She hadn't slept properly since that terrible argument 2 days ago. The image of Lily's tear-stained face haunted her every time she closed her eyes. With unsteady hands, she opened the envelope and unfolded the letter. The paper was decorated with hand-drawn hearts and stars in crayon. "Dear Miss Vivien," the letter began in wobbly letters. "I know you're mad at Daddy, but I want to tell you about my mommy." Vivien's chest constricted. She glanced at her office door to ensure it was closed before continuing. "Mommy got very sick when I was little. Daddy says she was the bravest person he knew because she kept smiling even when it hurt. She told me to always be kind, even when other people aren't." A tear splashed onto the paper. Vivien quickly wiped it away, careful not to smudge the precious words. "When Mommy went to heaven, Daddy was very sad, but he still read me stories every night and made heart-shaped pancakes on Sundays. He never stopped being kind, even when his heart was broken." Vivien's carefully applied mascara began to run. She didn't bother wiping her eyes anymore. "Daddy says real heroes aren't just brave in war. They're brave every day by choosing love instead of being mean. He says that's harder than any battle." The words struck something deep inside Vivien. Her mind drifted back to her childhood home, a cold mansion filled with expectations instead of warmth. She remembered sitting at the dining room table, age 7, the same age as Lily, as her father lectured her about excellence. "Second place is for losers, Vivien," he'd said, tearing up her report card because of 1 B+. "The world doesn't reward weakness." Back in her office, Vivien's hands shook harder as she read on. "Miss Vivien, I saw you being kind at the charity. You helped that old man find his glasses, and you didn't even know anyone was watching. You let that little girl hug you, even though she had sticky hands from candy. I think you have a good heart, but maybe you're scared to show it." Vivien stood abruptly, walking to the window. The city sprawled below, all steel and glass, just like her father had taught her to be. Untouchable, unbreakable, successful, lonely. She thought of her mother, who'd never contradicted her father's harsh lessons, who'd watched silently as Vivien learned to lock away her tears, her desires, her need for love. "The board expects excellence," her father had said when he'd helped her become CEO. "Never let them see weakness. Never let anyone in." But Lily's letter wasn't finished. Vivien returned to her desk, sinking into her chair. "Daddy says everyone deserves a second chance. He gave one to that mean man at the charity who stole money. He said hurting people hurt others because they're scared." Vivien touched her chest, feeling her heart pound beneath expensive silk. When was the last time someone had seen through her wall? When was the last time anyone had written her a letter just to reach out, not to demand or manipulate? "I think you're scared, Miss Vivien. Maybe you're scared like Daddy was after Mommy died. But he says being brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared." More memories flooded back. The time she'd won a dance recital but her father hadn't shown up. The day she'd graduated valedictorian, and his only comment was, "Expected nothing less." The promotion to CEO, celebrated with a brief phone call, and a reminder to keep the shareholders happy. "Please don't be mean to Daddy anymore. He's a real hero, not just because of his medal, but because he shows love even when people are unkind. I think you could be a hero too, Miss Vivien. You just have to be brave enough to be kind." Vivien laid the letter down, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. She'd spent her whole life building walls, crafting a perfect image, chasing success at any cost. But this child's simple words had cracked her carefully constructed facade. The letter had one last line: "Love, Lily. P.S. Heroes don't have to be alone." Vivien stood up, her legs unsteady. She walked to her private bathroom and stared at her reflection. Her mascara had created dark streams down her cheeks. Her perfect hair was mussed from running her hands through it. For the first time in years, she looked human, vulnerable, real. She thought about Daniel, his quiet strength, his unwavering integrity, his capacity for forgiveness. She thought about Lily, her pure heart, her innocent wisdom, her ability to see good in everyone. Then she thought about herself, the scared little girl still trying to prove herself to a father who'd never learned to love, the woman who'd built an empire but had no one to share it with. Vivien straightened her shoulders and wiped her eyes. She'd been wrong about so many things. Wrong about Daniel. Wrong about what made a person strong. Wrong about herself. Looking at her reflection one last time, she made a decision. No more hiding. No more walls. No more letting fear win over faith. She would make things right, even if it cost her everything she'd spent her life building. Because maybe, just maybe, she'd find something worth far more than success. Taking a deep breath, Vivien picked up her phone. She had calls to make, starting with the board of directors. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of losing everything. She was afraid of never finding what really mattered. The Coles' tiny living room glowed with the soft light of their second-hand Christmas tree. Multicolored bulbs twinkled between paper chains Lily had made at school, and a single string of tinsel wrapped around the branches like a silver ribbon. The room wasn't fancy, but it was filled with love. Daniel sat cross-legged on the worn carpet beside Lily, watching her carefully unwrap her third and final present. She took her time with the paper, trying to save every piece just as her mother used to do. The thought made Daniel's heart ache and smile at the same time. "Look, Daddy." Lily held up a thick book of fairy tales, her eyes sparkling. "It's just like the one we saw at the bookstore." Daniel nodded, grateful he'd managed to save enough for the special edition she'd been eyeing for months. "Now we can read a new story every night." Lily hugged the book to her chest, breathing in the fresh paper smell. "Can we start tonight? Please?" Before Daniel could answer, 3 sharp knocks echoed through their small house. He frowned, checking his watch. Who would be visiting at 8 a.m. on Christmas morning? "Stay here, sweetheart," he said, rising from the floor. His military training kicked in, cautious, alert. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. Daniel approached the door, his sock-covered feet silent on the hardwood. Through the frosted glass panels, he could make out several dark shapes on his front porch. When he opened the door, the bitter winter air rushed in, along with his surprise. Vivien Hale stood at the front of a group of serious-looking men and women in expensive winter coats. The board of directors. Daniel recognized them from company photos and newspapers. "Mr. Cole," Vivien said. Her voice wasn't its usual sharp, commanding tone. Instead, it carried a gentle uncertainty he'd never heard before. "May we come in? Please?" Daniel hesitated. The last thing he wanted was his Christmas morning invaded by corporate politics. But something in Vivien's expression made him step aside. "Daddy, who is it?" Lily called from the living room. "It's Miss Hale," Daniel answered, watching as Vivien and the board members filed into his modest entryway. "And some colleagues." Lily appeared in the doorway, still clutching her new book. Her face lit up at the sight of Vivien, apparently having already forgiven the harsh words from days before. "Miss Vivien, did Santa bring you here?" A few of the board members exchanged glances at the child's innocent question. Vivien's professional mask cracked slightly as she smiled at Lily. "No, sweetie, I brought myself. And these people are very important members of my company. We have something we need to say to your father." Daniel crossed his arms, preparing for some kind of corporate damage control. But Vivien surprised him by walking to the mantel where his Medal of Honor sat in its display case. She carefully lifted it, holding it with a reverence he hadn't expected from her. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Vivien began, her voice clear and strong despite the emotion Daniel could see building in her eyes. "This is the Congressional Medal of Honor. It's our nation's highest military decoration. awarded for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty. She turned to face them fully, holding the medal where they could all see it. Daniel Cole earned this medal by running into enemy fire to save 4 of his fellow soldiers. He carried 2 of them to safety while wounded himself. When asked why he did it, he said simply that they were his brothers, and he'd promised to bring them home. The board members stood in attentive silence as Vivien continued. This man, whom I fired just days ago for outdated practices, understands more about leadership, sacrifice, and integrity than I have in all my years as CEO. He showed me that true success isn't measured in profit margins or stock prices. It's measured in lives touched and hearts changed. Daniel watched, stunned, as Vivien carefully placed his medal back in its case. She turned to face the board, squaring her shoulders. That's why, effective immediately, I am resigning as CEO of Hale Enterprises. Gasps and murmurs erupted from the board members. One of them, a distinguished older man, stepped forward. "Miss Hale, surely we can discuss this." "No, Mr. Thompson." Vivien cut him off firmly but politely. "I've made my decision. I choose compassion over power. I choose integrity over image. And most importantly, I choose to be someone that little girl over there can look up to, rather than someone who hurt her father for the sake of a bottom line." Lily had moved closer during Vivien's speech, and now she slipped her small hand into Vivien's. The simple gesture seemed to give Vivien strength as she concluded her impromptu resignation. "I've learned more about true leadership in the past few days watching Daniel run that veterans charity than I have in 15 years of corporate climbing. If this company wants to succeed in the future, it needs to understand that profit without purpose is meaningless." Daniel stood rooted to the spot, processing the magnitude of what was unfolding in his living room. The proud, ambitious woman who had fired him without a second thought was voluntarily giving up everything she'd worked for because of him and Lily. The board members shifted uncomfortably, their expensive shoes creaking on his old floorboards. The contrast between their world and his had never been more apparent, yet somehow it didn't seem to matter anymore. In this moment, they were just people, stripped of titles and power, witnessing something extraordinary. The board members shifted uncomfortably in Daniel's modest living room, their expensive suits and polished shoes out of place among the humble decorations. Mr. Richardson, the head of the board, cleared his throat as he looked from Vivien to Daniel, then back again. "Miss Hale," he said slowly, "your dedication to this cause is admirable." He adjusted his tie, clearly wrestling with the situation. "But resignation? That seems rather extreme." Another board member, Mrs. Chen, stepped forward. Her eyes were fixed on the Medal of Honor that Vivien still held. "Perhaps," she said thoughtfully, "we've been approaching this all wrong." She glanced around the room, taking in Lily's handmade decorations and the small pile of carefully wrapped presents. "Our company has always prided itself on innovation," Mrs. Chen continued. "But maybe what we need isn't just technological advancement. Maybe we need to innovate in how we treat people." Mr. Richardson nodded slowly. "The publicity from our unfortunate handling of Mr. Cole's termination hasn't been good." He straightened his shoulders. "But the coverage of the charity work? That's been exceptional." "Because it was real," Vivien said firmly. "Not a PR stunt. Daniel taught me that." Daniel stood quietly, one hand on Lily's shoulder. His daughter watched the scene unfold with wide eyes, still clutching her half-unwrapped present. Mr. Richardson turned to Daniel. "Mr. Cole, would you consider returning to the company? Not in your old position, but as a senior consultant. We need someone to guide our veteran initiatives, someone who understands both worlds." Daniel blinked, caught off guard. "I appreciate the offer," he said carefully, "but the charity work has become important to me. Those veterans need support." "Why not both?" Mrs. Chen suggested. "Part-time consulting, while maintaining your role at the charity. The company could even establish a formal partnership with the organization." The other board members murmured in agreement. Mr. Richardson's expression softened as he watched Lily lean against her father's leg. "It would be good PR," one board member noted. "It would be good, period," Vivien corrected, her voice firm. The board turned to look at her, surprised by the steel in her tone. "This isn't about image. It's about doing what's right." Mr. Richardson studied her for a long moment. "You've changed, Miss Hale." "Yes," she said simply. "I have." He turned back to Daniel. "The position is yours if you want it, Mr. Cole. On your terms. Keep the charity work. In fact, we'll match any donations you raise, dollar for dollar." Daniel looked down at Lily, who nodded enthusiastically. "In that case," he said, "I accept." "And Miss Hale," Mr. Richardson continued, "we're not accepting your resignation, but we are expecting some changes in company policy." He gave her a meaningful look, with Mr. Cole's input, of course. Relief flooded Vivien's face, though she quickly composed herself. "Thank you," she said quietly. The board members began filing out, Mrs. Chen pausing to admire Lily's Christmas tree before she left. Soon, only Vivien remained, standing awkwardly by the door. "Could we talk?" she asked Daniel softly. "Outside?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "Lily, honey, stay here and finish opening your present. I'll be right back." They stepped out onto the small front porch. Snow was falling again, fat flakes drifting lazily in the early morning light. The street was quiet, peaceful in the way only Christmas morning could be. Vivien wrapped her arms around herself, more from nerves than cold. "I'm sorry," she said, "for everything, for how I treated you, for hurting Lily." "I know," Daniel replied. He leaned against the porch railing, watching the snow fall. "You're not the same person who fired me." "No," she agreed, "I'm not. You showed me there's more to life than quarterly reports and profit margins." She smiled faintly. "You and Lily both did. And you showed me that sometimes people can surprise you," Daniel admitted. "That sometimes they can change for the better." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching their breath-form clouds in the cold air. The snow continued to fall, dusting Vivien's dark hair with white flakes. "The charity dinner?" Vivien said suddenly. "When everyone was singing Silent Night, that was the first time I'd felt part of something real in years. Something that mattered." Daniel nodded. "I saw you singing," he said. "That's when I first thought maybe there was more to you than the Ice Queen CEO." "Ice Queen?" Vivien laughed softly. "Is that what they called me?" "Among other things," Daniel smiled. "But not anymore." The snow fell between them, each flake carrying away a bit more of the tension that had defined their relationship for so long. They had both been changed by the events of the past few weeks. Vivien softened by compassion, Daniel opened to new possibilities. Inside, they could hear Lily's delighted gasp as she finally finished unwrapping her present. The sound made them both smile. "We should go back in," Daniel said. "It's Christmas morning after all." Vivien nodded, but neither of them moved just yet. They stood there in the gentle snowfall, two people who had started as adversaries and become something else entirely, something neither of them had expected but both now treasured. The transformation was as quiet as the falling snow, but just as real, just as lasting. The winter evening wrapped the town square in a gentle darkness, softened by strings of twinkling lights draped between lampposts. Families bundled in winter coats and scarves gathered around the massive evergreen that towered above them, its branches still dark but promising magic once lit. Children darted through the crowd, their laughter carried on the crisp air along with the scent of hot chocolate and cinnamon. Daniel adjusted Lily's wool hat, making sure her ears were covered against the cold. She bounced on her toes, her excitement making it impossible to stand still. "Is it time yet, Daddy? When do we get to turn on the lights?" "Soon, sweetheart," he said, smiling at her enthusiasm. "Look, here comes Mayor Thompson now." The mayor approached through the crowd, his red scarf bright against his dark coat. Behind him, Vivien walked carefully through the snow in more practical boots than her usual heels, though she still maintained her elegant appearance in a cream-colored wool coat. She'd changed since that morning's confrontation with the board, looking more relaxed, more genuine. "There's my favorite family," Mayor Thompson called out, his voice carrying across the square. Several townspeople turned to smile at them. No trace of the earlier tension that had surrounded Vivien's presence. The morning's news of her stand for veterans' rights had spread quickly through the small community. Lily broke free from Daniel's grip and ran to hug Vivien. "You came. Daddy said you might be too busy." Vivien knelt down, not caring about the snow dampening her coat. "I wouldn't miss this for anything," she said, her voice soft with emotion. The Ice Queen persona had melted away completely. Daniel watched the interaction, remembering how different things had been just days ago. The change in Vivien wasn't just surface level. He could see it in her eyes, in the gentle way she treated Lily, in how she now carried herself with humility instead of rigid pride. Mayor Thompson cleared his throat and addressed the crowd. "Friends and neighbors, what a blessed Christmas this has been. Tonight, we continue our tradition of lighting our town Christmas tree, but this year is special." He gestured to Daniel, Lily, and Vivien. "Would our guests of honor please join me?" They made their way through the parting crowd to stand beside the control box near the tree's base. Lily grabbed both Daniel's and Vivien's hands, forming a chain between them. "This year," the mayor continued, his voice carrying across the hushed square, "we've witnessed something remarkable. We've seen how faith, forgiveness, and love can transform hearts. Daniel Cole, our decorated hero, and Vivien Hale, who has shown us that true leadership means having the courage to choose what's right over what's easy, along with young Lily, who reminded us all of the pure wisdom of a child's heart, will do us the honor of lighting our tree." The crowd applauded warmly. Daniel caught Vivien's eye over Lily's head, seeing his own emotion reflected there, how far they'd come from that terrible moment in her office, when she'd fired him with such cold efficiency. "Ready?" Mayor Thompson asked, stepping back to give them room. Lily tugged on Vivien's hand. "Aunt Viv, can you help me pull the switch? It might be too heavy for just me." Vivien's breath caught at the unexpected title, her eyes glistening. "Of course, sweetheart," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. Daniel's heart swelled at the exchange. He moved closer, placing his arm around them both as they stood before the switch. The gesture felt natural, right, like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. "Everyone count with me," Lily called out to the crowd, her clear voice ringing with joy. The townspeople responded enthusiastically. 10, 9, 8. Vivien leaned slightly into Daniel's embrace as they counted down. 7, 6, 5. Lily's excitement was contagious, her whole body trembling with anticipation. 4, 3, 2, 1. The crowd's shout filled the square. Together, Lily and Vivien pulled the switch. The massive tree blazed to life, thousands of lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Gasps of wonder rose from the crowd as the lights reflected off the gently falling snow, creating a magical atmosphere. Christmas carols began playing through the speakers placed around the square. Children cheered and spun in circles, trying to catch snowflakes on their tongues. Parents held up phones to capture the moment, but Daniel, Vivien, and Lily remained still, savoring the perfect moment together. "It's beautiful," Lily whispered, her face glowing in the warm light of the tree. "Yes, it is," Vivien agreed. But she wasn't looking at the tree. She was looking at Lily, then at Daniel, her expression full of wonder at finding herself part of this small family. Daniel tightened his arm around them both, feeling a peace he hadn't known since losing his wife. The three of them stood together as the snow continued to fall, creating a gentle curtain of white that seemed to separate them from the celebrating crowd. In that moment, they were simply a family, not a war hero, a CEO, and a little girl, but three hearts that had found healing in each other. The townspeople moved around them, singing carols, sharing greetings, and admiring the tree. But Daniel, Vivien, and Lily remained in their own quiet bubble of joy. Lily hummed along with "Silent Night," swinging their joined hands, while Vivien rested her head lightly against Daniel's shoulder. Snow collected on their coats and in their hair, but none of them wanted to move. They had found something precious in their journey of faith, love, and redemption. They had found each other. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Daniel Cole, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.